right. Dun, dun, dun. Hello, my name is Allison Beheler, and today I will be talking to you about Whiteland, Indiana. So, how do you talk 5 minutes about a town that you can walk through in 3? You talk about the history. My hometown of Whiteland, Indiana, is located in Johnson County, Indiana, off of Interstate 65 and US 31. In 2010, the consensus stated that there was 4,000 people living in approximately 3 square miles. And it was incorporated in 1886, and according to the 1900 consensus, only 334 people lived. And it was only a railway stop of a farmtown community. I have lived in Whiteland for 21 years in the middle of a cornfield. I grew up in the school corporation, and I've seen the town grow from a small stop off of 65 to a very busy town that is growing towards a larger development, needing new schools, road development, and often major building renovations. Whiteland is home to lots of history. It's gone from a few small shops to now a large truck stop of 65 and a major interstate intersection of 31, and now the high school holds 1,700 students. The story is really interesting, and often residents don't even know about the historical buildings that are still present and the stories that are still evident in the town history. The historical moments I'm going to be covering for you are the establishment of the town, the development of the school system, and the interurban railway stops. In 1858, there was only a general store, a blacksmith shop, a wheelwright, and a flour mill on 40 lots. The town was that small. Joseph White owned the general store, and Mr. Graham owned the flour mill. Whiteland, Graham, is one of the major roads in the middle of Whiteland is called Graham Road. The flour mill was eventually turned into the grain elevator, Graham and Dixon, and it was one of the largest buyer and shippers on the JM&I Railroad between Franklin and Indianapolis. Whiteland Methodist Church, which is still present today, was developed in 1835. In 1881, it only cost $2,000 to build. The stained glass windows, which were installed in 1881, were only $300 and still remain today, and they are irreplaceable due to their unique story and their history. The preachers of the time were not ordained, but they were men of the community who were simply able to lead a church service. And today it stands as one of the oldest established religious communities in town. In 1860, there was a post office of Wheatland, and they then found out that a couple towns over was another town named Wheatland. So they changed the name to Whiteland, and the theory is that Joseph White, who was the first postmaster, was the reason they renamed it to Whiteland. There was a bank in 1909 that resulted from booming farming and business ventures, and it closed in 1933 due to the Depression, but the building itself is still located in downtown Whiteland. Once town development got rolling, residents had to start going to school. And in 1835, the closest school was 1 mile southeast of town. But 10 years later, it was eventually improved, and they started using it as a church as well. Tuition was $1.50 for students over the course of 3 months, and the first school in Whiteland itself was developed in 1869 through the 1950s, and it taught grades 1 through 12. The first graduating class was 1894 of 1 student, and it finally doubled in size to 2 students in 1916. The Clark and Whiteland school systems joined together in 1965, and that still remains today. which has now grown into 5 elementary schools, an intermediate school, a middle school, and 1 high school. Once town was established, public transportation was needed. The interurban railway is a development from the streetcar shortly after the 20th century. It was a trolley-like vehicle, ran off of an electric railway. The term interurban means between cities, which is why it was given that name for its purpose. In January 1900, Indianapolis, Greenwood, and Franklin car first traveled to Indianapolis. Eventually, the Public Service Corporation of Indianapolis took over, and the car eventually made stops every 2 hours, 7 days a week, including one in Whiteland. The trip from Whiteland to Franklin cost 15 cents per ticket, and a book of tickets through round trip was $3. The trolley car ran approximately 60 miles per hour, and the tracks were laid 10 feet from US 31. Now, since the tracks crossed over 31 at multiple stops, and due to the speeds of both the trolley and the cars, there were multiple accidents, and lots of people were killed. However, the Public Service Company did not abandon the tracks permanently until a major accident in 1941. There was also a post office next to the railroad tracks, which is their mail distribution was done through mail put into a bag and hung on a hook. And as the train drove past, a hook would reach off of the train and grab it, and then they would drop bags of mail onto the ground for then post office workers to gather and distribute in town. The history of Whiteland is of a unique and small town, and is developed into a special story for residents of the town. The original bank of Whiteland has now turned into an independent screen print store, and the high school now holds 1,700 students. And the trains only pass through for what seems like the reason to make you late for work and late for school. But it still manages to have a small town feel. I hope you enjoyed learning about the history of Whiteland, Indiana. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.